I was dating a ghost with a pulse. I didn't notice it at first. That he never paid for anything, never planned anything, never finished anything. He slept till noon, said he was working on something big, and somehow that big thing never showed up, except in excuses. Rent? Late. Groceries? On me. His phone bill? Somehow also on me. Every time I brought it up, he'd kiss my forehead and say, "Babe, you believe in me, right?" I did. That was my first mistake. I worked doubles. I came home exhausted. He was always on the couch, controller in hand, promising he'd clean after this match. The apartment stayed dirty. My resentment stayed quiet. I told myself relationships were about patience. Then the little things started feeling off. His phone was suddenly always face down. He took calls outside. He showered before leaving the house, something he never did unless I begged. When I asked where he was going, he'd say, "Just clearing my head." One night, I got home early, earlier than he expected. The apartment was empty, too empty. No controller, no shoes, his jacket gone. His laptop was still open on the table. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I just went to close it. That's when a message popped up. "I missed last night. When can I see you again?" My stomach dropped. Then another message appeared. "She still doesn't know, right?" I scrolled. Photos, laughing selfies, inside jokes, plans, things he never had energy to give me. And right as I was staring at the screen, trying to breathe, the front door unlocked, and he walked in with her behind him. I stood there for a second after walking out, and it hit me like a delayed bruise. I had been living with a stranger who only looked like my boyfriend. Not because he cheated, because cheating was just the finale. The real betrayal was the years of quiet theft before that. The stolen money, the stolen energy, the stolen peace. The way he watched me drown and still asked for one more thing. That first night away, I didn't sleep like a heartbroken person. I slept like someone who'd been holding their breath for too long and finally remembered what oxygen felt like. My body was exhausted, but my mind was awake in a new way, like it was finally scanning the room for exits. In the morning, I didn't wake up with the usual panic of fixing everything. I woke up with a plan. I wasn't going back to argue. I wasn't going back to cry. I wasn't going back to beg for decency from someone who had been comfortably indecent for years. I was going back to reclaim my life like it was property, and it was because I had paid for it. I started with facts because facts don't shake when your hands do. I was the one on the lease. I was the one who paid the deposit. I was the one who signed the internet contract and the electric account and the renter's insurance. I was the one who bought the couch and the bed and every plate in the cabinet. The apartment wasn't ours, it was mine. And he had been renting space inside it with affection he didn't mean. I spent so long treating him like a partner that I forgot what it looked like when someone was just a passenger. I drove back while he was out, because he was always out when he shouldn't have been. I didn't even need to guess where he'd be. The pattern had been obvious once I stopped defending it. He left when it was convenient, returned when he was hungry, and stayed only long enough to drain the place of comfort like it was a charging station. My friend came with me, not because I needed muscle, but because I needed a witness. Someone to stand next to me and remind me I wasn't crazy. Someone to watch the version of me that finally chose herself so I wouldn't later rewrite it into guilt. When I unlocked the door, the apartment felt different, like it knew, like it had been waiting for this. I walked through each room with my heart beating hard but steady. The mess was still there, exactly the way I'd left it in our daily life. The half-finished chores, the little evidence of someone who lived like the world would always clean up behind him. It was almost insulting how consistent he was at being useless. I didn't start with sentimental things. I started with practical things, the things that made the place livable, the things he treated like magic that just happened. I opened cabinets and made a mental list. I checked drawers. I grabbed documents. I collected anything with my name on it. I took photos of everything, not to be petty, but to be smart. Then I called the landlord and verified what I already knew. I didn't have to justify myself. I didn't have to argue. I was the tenant. I had the legal right to control access. And if I wanted someone out, I could start the process the correct way instead of the emotional way. I learned something important right then. When you do things the right way, you don't have to do them twice. I scheduled the locks to be changed the same day. I called the utility company and set a transfer date so nothing could be sabotaged. I changed passwords for every account attached to that address. I shut down the services that were his favorite because they were also the clearest symbol of what I'd been funding: comfort for someone who wasn't building anything. I didn't do any of it with anger. I did it like someone cleaning an infection: calm, precise, determined. Then I started packing. Not my things, but his. It would have been easy to throw everything in trash bags and dump it outside like a dramatic scene. But drama is what he thrived on. He would have used it to paint himself as the victim. So I did it cleanly, carefully, almost professionally. I folded his clothes, I boxed his shoes, I gathered the items that belonged to him, and I separated them from the things he only used because I had purchased them. Every time I picked up something of his, I had a memory attached to it. Times I defended him, times I excused him, times I told myself I was being understanding. And with every item, I felt the same realization settle deeper. I wasn't understanding, I was enabling. He never had to become better because I kept making life soft enough for him to stay the same. At some point, my friend asked me if I was okay, and I realized my face felt almost numb. Not because I didn't care, because I had already cried all my tears across the relationship itself. I had cried the day I paid the rent alone and told myself it was temporary. I had cried the day I bought groceries and he ate like it was owed. I had cried the day I came home exhausted and still cleaned while he watched. I had cried 1,000 tiny cries that nobody saw because I didn't want anyone to know I was dating someone who didn't even try. This wasn't the first time my heart broke. This was just the first time I stopped taping it together for him. When the locks were changed, something inside me finally felt solid, like a door had closed in my chest and I could finally rest my back against it. I left his boxes in a neat stack with a note that didn't insult him, didn't threaten him, didn't beg him. Just instructions: where to pick up his things, when, and how. Clear boundaries, no emotion he could twist, no words he could quote to make me look unstable. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I cleaned the apartment for me. Not the frantic cleaning I used to do when I hoped he'd notice and finally help. Not the resentful cleaning I did while fantasizing that he'd wake up and change. Just normal, peaceful cleaning, like the place belonged to an adult who respected herself. I opened windows, I let air in, I washed sheets, I threw out old food. I scrubbed the sink and realized I wasn't angry that I had to scrub it. I was relieved that I was no longer scrubbing for someone who would immediately dirty it again. By the time evening came, the apartment looked like mine for the first time, and the silence felt like safety. Later that night, he started calling. At first, it was rapid, constant, like he believed volume could force reality to shift back into his favor. Then it slowed, then sped up again. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear his excuses. I had heard every variation of them already, just dressed differently. I knew the script: the denial, the minimization, the attempt to blame me for being cold, the sudden promises to change, the dramatic declarations that he loved me, the anger when love didn't work. He wasn't calling because he missed me. He was calling because he missed what I provided. And I could finally see the difference. The next day, he tried showing up. He stood outside the building like he belonged there, like he could still walk in and drop his shoes on my floor and eat my groceries and sleep in my bed and then leave again whenever he got bored. But the new locks didn't recognize him. He had to face the first real consequence of his life, and it didn't come as a screaming fight. It came as a simple fact. He didn't have access anymore. He tried to get sympathy from neighbors. He tried to look wounded. He tried to turn it into a story where I was cruel. But it's hard to play the victim when you have no receipts and the other person has been paying the bills the whole time. A few days passed and then the pattern shifted. He tried to negotiate. He tried to charm. He tried to sound reasonable. He tried to sound like a man with options, like he wasn't suddenly realizing he had nowhere to go. But I stayed quiet, stayed firm, stayed consistent. That's the part people like him can't handle. They can handle anger because anger is an opening. They can handle tears because tears can be manipulated. They can handle arguments because arguments mean you're still engaged. He tried to charm. He tried to sound reasonable. He tried to sound like a man with options, like he wasn't suddenly realizing He had nowhere to go. But I stayed quiet, stayed firm, stayed consistent. That's the part people like him can't handle. They can handle anger because anger is an opening. They can handle tears because tears can be manipulated. They can handle arguments because arguments mean you're still engaged. They can't handle silence plus boundaries because silence plus boundaries means the game is over. He eventually picked up his boxes. He did it with the kind of humiliation that wants to turn into rage. I didn't watch from the window. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me react. I just let it happen like a delivery. After that, I heard things through mutual friends, the way news travels when someone wants attention. I heard he moved back in with family. I heard he complained about me like I'd betrayed him. I heard he told people I was controlling, which was funny because the only thing I ever controlled was the part of my life he kept trying to consume. I also heard the girl didn't stick around because once the apartment wasn't his, once the comfort wasn't automatic, once his lifestyle wasn't funded, he became exactly what he always was, a man full of charm and empty hands. People like that are entertaining when they're at a party. They are exhausting when they're in your home. What surprised me most wasn't losing him. It was how much I gained immediately afterward. My money stopped disappearing. My weekends stopped being ruined by tension. My home stopped feeling like a place I had to manage. I stopped anticipating disappointment like it was weather. I started noticing things I hadn't noticed in years, like the way my shoulders weren't permanently tight, like the way I could come home and not feel that small dread in my stomach. And then the guilt tried to creep in, uh, not because I missed him, but because I was trained to feel responsible for other people's comfort. I had spent so long being the one who fixed, the one who soothed, the one who made things okay, that my brain tried to punish me for choosing myself. So I did something I wish I'd done earlier. I wrote a list of what I had carried. Every bill I paid alone, every promise he broke, every time I cleaned while he watched, every time I worked harder so he could work less. Every time I lowered my expectations and called it love. I didn't write it to hate him. I wrote it to remember. Because nostalgia is a liar and loneliness is a magician. They can turn a person who hurt you into someone you maybe judged too harshly. They can turn disrespect into miscommunication. They can turn years of neglect into, but he had good moments. My list kept me honest. Weeks passed, and I started rebuilding in small ways. I rearranged furniture just because I could. I bought new towels and realized I'd been using the same old ones because it felt pointless to upgrade when my life felt like a leak. I cooked meals that were actually mine, not meals designed to please someone who never said thank you. I went out with friends without checking my phone every 10 minutes to see what crisis he'd created. I slept like a person who wasn't waiting for the next argument. I laughed without feeling like I had to earn it. I even took a day off work, something I never did because I was always compensating for his lack of contribution. I walked around the city and realized I had been living in survival mode for so long that peace felt unfamiliar. Then one day I ran into him by accident. Not a dramatic reunion, not fate, just life being random. He looked smaller, not physically, but spiritually, like someone whose confidence was made of borrowed things and all the loans had been called in at once. He tried to look unbothered, tried to look like he was doing fine, but I could see it. The discomfort, the embarrassment, the scramble in his eyes for a way to regain control. And for the first time, I looked at him without love, without anger, without the need to prove anything. Just clarity. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. I realized he hadn't ruined me. He had delayed me. And the moment I stopped carrying him, I started moving again. I walked away without stopping. I didn't need closure from him because I gave it to myself the day I changed the locks. I gave it to myself the day I stopped answering. I gave it to myself the day I realized that love is not measured by how much you tolerate. Love is measured by how much you respect. And he never respected me. The ending wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't me winning something tangible. It was me coming home to a clean, quiet apartment, closing the door behind me and feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: relief. I wasn't dating a ghost anymore. I was living as myself again. And that was the happiest ending I could have written.